BBC's recent documentary on Narendra Modi and Gujarat, you have the government of India's official spokesperson accusing the journalists who produced that documentary of having a neo-colonial mindset. Such a serious allegation to make. It's one thing to have a difference, and this is coming from the same government that lowered the Indian flag to half-mast when Queen Elizabeth died. And then they're accusing the journalists who made this documentary of being neo-colonial. And all kinds of other allegations have been made against them that they are trying to incite Hindu-Muslim tension. So this is sadly part of the occupational hazard, that along with the recognition that you get from readers, viewers, and your peers, there will be pressure, and in a way, we should learn to accept that pressure also as a kind of badge of honor. That we must be doing something right if those who are in power, or if the most powerful sections of society who traditionally do not like to be asked any questions, if they are getting angry and upset with us, then that's a good thing.
At a time of global truth decay, as the former American President Obama has said, and a moral decline that we are seeing not just in India, but it is across the globe. So this idea of speaking truth to power is increasingly becoming difficult. As you just mentioned, the BBC documentary where the digital ethics code of 2021 was the emergency powers under that particular rules were invoked. So how do we we have to go to the judiciary again now to challenge this. We got the section 66A struck down in 2015, and now again in 2022 you have to fight with these new rules to get things done. How do we navigate these challenges imposed by the state?
So I think it's important to recognize that the challenges that the media in India is facing, there is something specific and unique about it, but it is also part of a worldwide trend where there is growing intolerance towards independent media, critical media. I was reading recently, just last week, about a case in Finland where the leading newspaper of Finland, it's called Helsingin Sanomat. So it's like the Hindu of Finland, or the Times of India of Finland. So they had run a story about 4 years ago on questioning the Secret Service in Finland, raising some questions about it, and they published some documents, and they were taken to court for violation of the Finland's equivalent of the Official Secrets Act, and unfortunately, one journalist got convicted and fined, and this is in Finland. And we know that also in the United States, there's a renewed attack on media freedom when it comes to the confidentiality of sources. Or even if you look at the treatment that Julian Assange, you mentioned WikiLeaks in your introduction, and I'm very proud actually to have been part of the team. It wasn't just me. I didn't fully follow what he was saying in Tamil, but the Hindu was the publishing partner of WikiLeaks, and this arrangement began when Mr. Ram was editor-in-chief. I was chief of bureau in Delhi, and we had a team of about 8 or 9 people, and we worked in secret for 6 or 7 months to get all this stuff together. And it was a very proud moment for us that we were able to publish this material and to make responsible use of it. So it's very distressing. A few years later, when I became editor, and there was another proposal from the WikiLeaks organization, and I went to the UK to meet Julian Assange, and to see him virtually captive in the Ecuador, in the embassy of Ecuador. He had lost a lot of weight. He was, he was clearly dispirited because this kind of pressure takes a toll on you. And to think that 10 years later, that attack on Julian Assange still continues. And it's quite possible that the British government will extradite him to the United States, where he faces such serious charges, which may also include the death penalty. So, and what did he do? He brought into the public domain information that was clearly in the public interest. And I can say that having worked with Assange and WikiLeaks, the terms and conditions of our collaboration was that as a paper, as Hindu, we were also obliged to use these materials responsibly, to delete the names of individuals if disclosure of information about them would lead to a threat to their life. And we were very careful about this. So some cables were not reported on, some names were never given. And I don't think there's a single instance that anybody can point to of WikiLeaks cables actually having contributed to the death or injury of any individual. And I dare say, I don't think, yes, it undermined US foreign policy or US, the big power policy in many ways, because it exposed the inner workings. And it was embarrassing for the US. But to say that this is a treasonous act, to say that this is an attack on US national security, to warrant somebody's trial and imprisonment and even execution, is really ridiculous. And if in the United States, which has always respected freedom of the press, you can have this kind of a situation, then this is really very, very alarming. So throughout the world, there is this problem. In Turkey, in Russia, I was reading just last week about a website called Medusa. So the Russians the Russian government has a law which gives the state the right to declare any organization as, I forget the precise title, but enemy organization or anti-state organization. So they declared Medusa, which is an independent website, as anti-state, which means that, of course, the website is illegal. And anybody who, quote unquote, supports this website, either by donating some money or by writing an article or even by sharing an article, under Russian law could be liable for prosecution. It's a huge attack on media, and of course, the attack is not just on the media; it's on ordinary Russians, and it's all aimed at ensuring that the truth of what's happening in the country doesn't come out. That's what all these people have in common. All these anti-media actions have in common, that you want to make sure the truth doesn't come out. So in India, we have our own, laws, rules, attempts to strangulate the press. I was reading today about a hearing in Delhi High Court, most ridiculous, where the central government, union government, is demanding that the High Court should restrain or restrict the circulation or the activities of independent fact-finding commissions. So the context is that the Delhi riots took place in February 2020, which led to the death of about 60 people. And we all know, we covered those riots, and we know the way in which the police was partisan. We know the way in which the Hindutva organizations were involved in that violence. And the police did a cover-up, and they went, in fact, and arrested the victims and tried to claim as if the riots in which most people who were killed, 2/3 of the people killed were Muslims. But the police tried to say that this is a Muslim conspiracy. 95% of the properties damaged. 99% of the, I think 100% of the places of worship that were damaged were all Muslim. But the police says that this is a conspiracy of Muslim organizations and primarily Muslim individuals. So you had an independent fact-finding commission led by Justice Madan Lokur, which confirmed what many of us in the press had been reporting. And the government was so upset with this that they are supporting an effort in the Delhi High Court to put a stop to these kinds of initiatives, which is it is so dictatorial. Not only are you suppressing the truth, but you want to prevent civil society members from, you know, uncovering the truth. Now think about it. All the big stories of the last 3 decades largely came out because of unofficial fact finding. In the November 1984 massacre of Sikhs in Delhi, right, 5,000 people are killed in the capital city and other cities. Officially, the figure is 2,733, but unofficially, the death toll is more than that. And the official commission of inquiry, Mishra Commission, took many years and whitewashed all the, basically sanitized the whole narrative. It was only because of the independent reports of People's Union of Civil Liberties, People's Union for Democratic Rights. They published a small booklet called Who Are the Guilty? Or there was, I think Justice Krishna Iyer and Justice Tarkunde, there were some others who did similar fact-finding. There were 3 or 4 reports which brought before the nation the fact that this violence had been organized by Congress party leaders with the collusion of the police. And if you follow the logic of the Modi government, which is that these private unofficial commissions of inquiry are to be discouraged, they should be restrained, then that the truth of 84 would never have come out, because the newspapers of the day didn't cover it. The fact is that the newspapers of the day essentially reported the government's version of what was happening. Today you have a situation where at least the media is, a large section of the media is compromised. But there is a significant section of the media. And it's not a small section. Wire is one website, but we are just one of many websites that do not follow the diktat of the government. You have News Minute, News Laundry, Scroll, Alt News, Quint, and then you have newspapers. Whatever you may think about them, Telegraph, The Hindu, Deccan Herald, a lot of very, very good reporting, strong editorials. In 84, we didn't have that. Today, you have somewhat vibrant section of the media. Bulk of the media is horrible, at least nationally. I can't say about in Tamil Nadu, but the national English channels, the Hindi channels, virtually 100% of them are all compromised. And now the government has the IT rules, as you mentioned, as a means of shutting up that section of the media that is trying to do its job. It will astonish you to know that, of course, the striking down of Section 66A of the IT Act in 2015 was a very big victory for not just journalists, but I think for civil society as a whole. But it will astonish you to know that in the 8 years since the Supreme Court struck it down, the police continues to file cases under 66A. And the Supreme Court had to summon the chief secretaries of various states to say, how on earth are you allowing cases to be filed under a law that we have declared is ultra-virus, that it is unconstitutional? How can you still file cases? But the police is doing it. And you can imagine that with the new IT rules and some of the other laws which exist already, like a new trend is, like when I was editor of the Hindu, the biggest danger that we faced as reporters, as editors, Nakiran was a victim, Hindu was a victim of defamation. I remember virtually the first or second day that I became editor, a case was launched by the Jayalalitha government, criminal defamation case, because Nakiran had carried an article about beef or something, beef eating Mami, and Hindu had done a story about that, and she filed a criminal defamation case against Nakiran, against the Hindu, against Enram, and against our reporter, I think Kolappan. And then, of course, in the 2 years that I was editor, I also got 2 or 3 criminal defamation cases. But, so, though, I mean, I'm not trying to minimize, that is a form of harassment. But criminal defamation, which should not exist, by the way, it's a very, I mean, civil defamation is bad enough. And India is the only democratic country which still retains criminal defamation on the statute books. But criminal defamation is a funny kind of criminal case because the police does not have the right to arrest you. Police, in fact, even the investigation of criminal defamation is not meant to be handled by the police. But now, under the BJP, and unfortunately also in many states, there's a new trend of invoking criminal law against journalists. So during COVID, when there's a small portal called Simplicity, and they ran a couple of stories on how the ration shops during the lockdown had run out of food, and the Coimbatore police filed a criminal case against the publisher. His name is Andrew Sam Pandian, under the Epidemic Diseases Act, under the Disaster Management Act. It's ridiculous. And we tabulated, we ran a story that by the end of that lockdown, something like 60 or 70 journalists across the country had criminal cases simply for doing their job. In Himachal, in UP, in Gujarat, in Maharashtra. And in Maharashtra, there was a reporter who simply reported the fact that the railways had announced that we are starting a train for people to go home. And then I guess the railways changed their mind, or there was some confusion. And there was chaos, huge crowds of people gathered there. Nothing happened, nobody died or anything. You could say it's one of those unfortunate miscommunications. But the reporter who reported this, they filed a criminal case against him. They tried to blame him. And after the pandemic, this trend has continued. We ran a story about, in fact, many people ran that story about an elderly Muslim gentleman in Ghaziabad who was attacked by some gundas, some goons, rowdies. And they pulled there was a video of his beard being pulled. You may remember seeing that video. And he also claimed on the video, in interviews to people, that these people abused me and made me say various religious slogans which I did not like, etc. And people reported what the old man was saying. This caused a lot of embarrassment for the UP government. So they filed criminal cases against 4 or 5 Muslim journalists and public figures who had tweeted, including Sabah Naqvi, who is a freelance reporter, and against The Wire, and a couple of other people. So simply for reporting the claim being made by the victim of a crime, media and journalists were having cases against them. And what was the charge against us? That you are inciting communal hatred. The victim of a communal crime is testifying about what he has experienced. As a reporter in good faith, you report that, and you get accused. Forget about the chaps who attacked that gentleman. You get accused of inciting communal hatred. It's ridiculous. And so similarly like that, we had at The Wire cases filed against us in Rampur and Barabanki. In Delhi, of all places, senior journalists like Mrinal Pandey and Rajdeep Sardesai and Vinod Jose of Caravan had a sedition case filed against them because they reported how a farmer who had died in the protests of January 2022, they reported that he had died of bullet injuries. Whereas actually the police claimed that he died in an accident. So instead of issuing a clarification or issuing a denial, like 20 years ago, if you did a story and the government disagreed with it, they would issue a strong denial and that would be the end of it. Now they issue a denial and then they file sedition case. It's outrageous. And, partly because of that misuse of sedition, blatant misuse of sedition law. And for lots of other reasons, the Supreme Court finally has said you can't use sedition anymore, which is a very positive thing. But with this government, one avenue gets closed, they find some other way to harass. And last year, in 2021, they came up with these IT rules, information technology rules, whose purpose is to strangulate not just digital media, but also the social media platforms whose importance lies in the fact that they are the distribution mechanism for news by smaller news organizations. Like the Wire has no funds to market. None of the websites I mentioned, or even the newspapers, have a great budget for publicity and marketing and advertising to push their stories. They rely on the democratic nature of social media, where if somebody likes a story, you may like a story, you tweet it, and your friends see it, they retweet it, and stories go viral. Or you share it on Facebook, or you share it on WhatsApp. And the IT rules created a framework where the government could direct social media companies to take down links. And the second part was created a framework to direct websites like ours to delete stories. And they did this under the guise of so-called reader grievances. So every website is obliged to appoint a grievance redressal officer whose job it is to receive complaints from so-called readers who are upset about something. And it should be very obvious in this tech-savvy political world where every party has an IT cell with thousands of people. It's not difficult to generate grievances or to fabricate reader complaints. But as a website, under that IT rules, we are obliged to respond to that reader grievance within 48 hours. And if the reader is not satisfied, so let's say we did a story, as the Wire did, explaining exactly what the BBC documentary contained. So if the IT rules were applicable, we went to court along with others and got a stay on that. So that's why those rules don't apply to us. Right now they're stayed. But if the rules had not been stayed, then some reader who is actually a BJP guy could complain to the Wire first that this story is no good, it hurts my sentiments, you are attacking my prime minister, etc., etc. And when we say no, sorry, the story is absolutely fine, that reader has the right to escalate the matter to the government, where an interministerial committee will then discuss that and take a decision as to whether the reader is right or we are right. And they would then have the power to direct the Wire to delete that story. Now, how is this possible in a country that has freedom of the press? Freedom of the press under Article 19 is subject only to reasonable restrictions, which have to be specified in law. So it can't be that some joint secretary in the Information and Broadcasting Ministry or some additional secretary in Home Ministry doesn't like something and he says, the Wanda, you get rid of it. And then we have to jump and listen to that. It's not possible. And we will not do it. And I don't think the courts will uphold this. But because the court did not stay Section 16, which gives the INB secretary the power to direct social media intermediaries to remove links, they invoke that power, complete overreach. It's an emergency power. And they invoke that power to force YouTube and Twitter to take down those links about the BBC documentary. And what is worse, Once that was done, even though there is no formal ban, there is no ban on the documentary, by the way. It is legal to watch it, to see it, to share it. But they created this huge scare, and students who were trying to watch it have been suspended, they've been beaten, they've been pushed, they've been prevented. In Jawaharlal Nehru University, they cut the electricity to campus so that students couldn't show it. So it's this kind of an attack that's happening where, and I'm saying this, and I'm giving the example of BBC because this highlights the fact that the attack is not just on you and me as journalists. The attack is on students. The attack is on the wider public. The attack is on civil society, because they're saying even a retired judge cannot hold a commission of inquiry if he wants to. And of course, based on the headlines, etc., the attack is on judiciary also. The attack is on the power of state governments, because the federalism is under attack. So what is happening with the IT rules has to be seen in that larger context, that you want to control the narrative every which way. Whether it's what the state government says or does, what campuses do, what civil society does, or what the media does.
Yes, that's a great overview of the media. Also, I want to just build on that particular perspective of, it's not so grim as we see in the Deccan Herald editorials, or some of the editorials of the Hindu, or some of the bold first page articles of the Telegraph. That not everything is grim, but at the same time, what is the proportion or the measure of dissent that we are seeing currently? Particularly, I don't recall the author's name, but in the last decade, including the Wire, in the last 8 years, you are able to flip the narrative to a great extent. At least I'm not talking about the whole political narrative, at least the majoritarian political narrative to some extent. So where do you see us in the next couple of years?
So I think that's a good question also, because very often people in government, they also frame the issue not quite the way you have put it, but they say, there is no crisis. Wire is publishing. Hindu is free to publish. We are having this meeting, right? And so this proves that India is a free country and democracy is fine. There is no crisis. And this, there is a story. I don't know if it's true or not. I've seen it sometimes attributed to Idi Amin, sometimes to Mugabe. That in our country you have freedom of speech is guaranteed, but freedom after speech is not. So the point is that you have freedoms, you can exercise those freedoms, but everything comes with a price. And you have to decide, and literally it's down to the conscience and the ability of individuals to do and say what they want, and to take that decision as to how far they can go. We, as a media organization, chose in 2015 that we would be non-profit. Because when me and my colleagues looked at the media landscape, it was very clear to us that the primary transmission belt for pressure, whether it's from government, whether it's from big companies, is on the proprietor, the investor, or the advertiser, big advertiser. So if you want to insulate yourself from that kind of pressure, it's better to have a media model that does not depend on one or two investors, that does not depend on one or two advertisers. So you have to broad base your business model. And in an ideal world, since a free press exists to serve the needs of a free people, it is the free people themselves who need to guarantee the financial viability of free press. If people do not guarantee this, if they do not pay for it, then somebody else will pay, and that person who pays will demand to call the shots. This is the fundamental problem. And the fact is that the media is not very profitable by itself. Even large newspapers, large TV companies struggle. And usually their owners have different businesses which they use to subsidize, cross-subsidize, or they'll use the media arm, even though it's loss-making, in order to promote their other businesses. That is how media survives. And a media which survives on the basis of this kind of business model is extremely vulnerable to pressure. So you can do a story. But Hindu, for example, did a whole series of stories on Rafale. The end result, DAVP, which controls the union government advertising, withdrew all its ads. Now, Hindu is a large enough paper to survive that. Same with Telegraph. Telegraph also, the price of writing those editorials on the front page was that it was deprived of a major and legitimate source of revenue. DAVP ads are ads of the government paid for by taxpayers' money. It should not be decided on the basis of party politics. This is not BJP's money. This is not DMK or ADMK's money, if I'm talking about state advertising. Or it's not Mamata Banerjee's personal money. This is taxpayers' money. And there should be a transparent way of allocating all government advertising so that, and certainly it should not be rationed on the basis of who is pro-government, who is anti-government. But that's the reality. So there is a price to pay. Bhaskar Group did a series of stories. Now Bhaskar Group is not a group that was known for very bold coverage. But during COVID phase 2, second wave in Uttar Pradesh, they broke a major story by investigating all the different cremation grounds, and were able to show how the actual death toll in UP was much, much more than what the Uttar Pradesh government was claiming. And everybody applauded Dainik Bhaskar. They got awards. I was in Bombay recently where Dainik Bhaskar editor got the Red Ink Publication of the Year award, very prestigious award. But 6 weeks or 8 weeks after those stories, you know how the income tax people landed up at Dainik Bhaskar Group. Not to investigate the paper, but they said that your bosses also have a coal mine, they also do other businesses, there is some Gapla there. Of course there is Gapla. There is Gapla everywhere. Virtually every company, you will find problems in the bookkeeping of every organization. And the government makes a strategic choice that which account books are we going to open and when. So you can have some organizations. Now, I'm not going into the rights and wrongs of what the Hindenburg Group has said about Adani. It's beyond the scope of this discussion. But it is astonishing that you can have a report of this kind, which is, in a way, seen as credible enough by investors around the world that you have massive selling of Adani shares. After all, I could put out a report saying that the Reliance Group is about to go bankrupt. But the market is not going to sell shares simply because I put out a report. But somewhere down the line, the market saw what Hindenburg produced as quite credible. Credible enough that people are selling shares. And not just one or two, huge amounts. Gautam Adani moved from being the third richest man in the world to number 10 within the space of 1 week. But has the government shown any interest in this? No. But government wants to knock on Prannoy Roy's door, I'm talking about 4 years ago, because some private investor had said that, he was not even an investor, some private persons questioned why a private bank, IDFC, had discounted one of the loans that they had given NDTV. And the total amount involved was 40 or 50 crore. And you had the CBI knocking on Dr. Prannoy Roy's house at 6 in the morning. So agencies being misused in this way, this is the price you pay. So on paper, of course, Everybody's free to write what they want. We are having this meeting. But the wire, we have paid the price with cases, multiple cases. We've paid the price with it becoming more and more difficult to raise money. And and everybody's pays the price one way or the other. So which way are things going to go? That's what you're asking. My sense is that if the IT rules are allowed to stand, particularly this new and highly dangerous proposal that if the PIB or any government department declares a certain news to be fake, then that news has to be deleted. It's ridiculous. How can of course every government department is opposed to any kind of negative or critical coverage, and they will happily declare. And in the last 2 weeks, we've seen so many examples people have given over the last 4 years, where the PIB fact check division has wrongly declared something to be fake. So how can we give power to these kind of people? How can the government be given the power to decide what is fake and what is not? So I think that the mindset of the current government, which is to tighten the screws on media, like there was one channel which was reasonably independent and free, which was NDTV. And now NDTV, after being bought over by Mr. Adani, you would have noticed if you watched the channel that they kept off. They were the only channel which for 3 or 4 days didn't cover the Hindenburg versus Adani story at all. And there have been no debates. Like you expect all of these channels take great pride in having debates every night. And this was a huge topic. No debate on this. No. So you can see how the government or people who are supporting the government have quite an easy way to silence media that is inconvenient to them. So this is the price you pay. And it's the don't underestimate the role that fear plays. My colleague Arfa Khanam Sherwani is in Srinagar right now. She'd gone for the end of Bharat Jodo Yatra and is staying behind for 2 days to cover what is happening in Kashmir. And we wanted to do a story on violations of press freedom in Kashmir. It's a terrible situation there. Kashmir journalists live in fear of the state. And you would find it astonishing that not a single journalist in Srinagar, and we must have spoken to 30 or 40, not a single journalist was willing to, privately they're giving all the stories about how the police is harassing, how the government is harassing, but not a single person wanted to speak on camera. Even when we offer to cover their face, disguise their voice, people are too scared. So, what is happening in Kashmir today, the idea is that this should happen throughout the country tomorrow. And if these IT rules go ahead, if the government is able to get away with the bullying of journalists, arresting, imprisoning, raiding, then between now and 2024, you will find the situation for media getting much, much more difficult. And this is a reality which we all have to prepare.
Now it's about the wire. Now the wire has in the 8 years, it has moved to the center of national conversations. If you know, I just watched Ramachandra Guha's interview with the current topper. Now you could get, because you already had worked with some of the national publications, and you could get some of the best talents in the country to your side, and you could pull it off, and now it's a great success story. But what do you tell young journalists who are aspiring to make a mark? I'm seeing people like Amit Verma who are doing great stuff on podcasts. They are pushing the envelope in a very big way. So what do you, because a lot of them are young people who would like to come out of their institutions and do great stuff. Some of them at least, I know. So what do you tell them?
So I would say 2 or 3 things. I would say that the situation is objectively very, very bad because of official hostility. That's the negative side. On the positive side, technology is your friend. What we have done with the wire uh, in the space of 8 years was possible for two reasons. First, that we saw that there was greater, that if people get together and do something jointly, that is much more powerful than one person doing something. So the wire came about because MK Venu, Siddharth Bhatia, myself, we said let us start a publication together, and we were able to bring other people to join us. Even when we had no funds, people were willing to write initially for free, and so I think the power of creating a group is not to be underestimated. It's very, very important. And the second is that Wire succeeded because we chose to be digital. If we had tried to start 30 years ago, if the three of us had wanted to start something new, you have the option of a newspaper or magazine or a TV station. Each of these would require investments of anywhere from minimum of 15 crore, 20 crore up to 100, 200 crore, which none of us have. And certainly you cannot put together that kind of money without an investor who, at the first sign of trouble, will run far away and abandon you. This is the reality. So digital allows you with virtually no capital to start something. The startup, we started the Wire with paid up capital of 6 lakhs. That's it. And today we are in a situation where our monthly budget is around 40 lakhs. So we spend around nearly 5 crore a year, most of which we raise from reader donations. And the balance comes from advertising on our YouTube channel and Google ads. We don't really have marketing of ads. Whatever automatic ads Google puts, we get some money for that. And we're able to raise and function on this basis. Of course, growing is a challenge. Like, how do we go from being a 5 crore a year company to a 10 crore a year company? Difficult. And we are working on that. But it is possible to start modest if you pool your resources, pool your talents, and make full use of digital. Now we actually, Siddharth Bhatia, Venu and me, we all came from print. I at least had the benefit of being editor of the Hindu, where I saw myself as editor not just of a newspaper but also of a website. And I used to pay a lot of attention to the Hindu.com, the website. But even then, the main focus was on the newspaper. Why? Because the newspaper is where the maximum impact we felt was. Newspaper was where the revenue was coming. So you had to create a newspaper. So even though we used to say that at the Hindu that we should break stories online first, but the temptation always was that no, if you break it this evening, then every paper will have it tomorrow. And then what is the advantage for the Hindu newspaper, which is paying the bills? So there was always this dilemma, which is why at the end of the day I was primarily a newspaper editor, not a website editor. And so the three of us, we entered the digital, and you'll be astonished to know, I mean, even though today video is a very important part of what we do, but in our first plans for the Wire, we had no idea that we should do any video. And it's only when we consulted with this Bangalore-based foundation that gave us a grant for the first 3 years. And they deputed Lakshmi Chaudhary, who used to work with First Post, and she said, "Where is your video plan?" And I said, "What video?" And she said, "No, you have to have video." And I said, "But we know nothing about video." So then she said, "You have to hire somebody." So we hired a young boy who understood a little bit of video, and then we started video. And then we were lucky to get Vinod Dua, who was this well-known Hindi broadcaster, to start doing programs for us. And then Karan Thapar got associated, Arfa Khanam Sherwani, some big names got associated. And today we have more than 4 million subscribers. to our YouTube channel. We're one of the biggest YouTube news subscribers outside of the television stations. And so, this is a great, but those of you who have not come, I gather that this is largely a TV association, and so you're perhaps much better placed to exploit and to use multimedia storytelling in a digital, through digital platforms than we ever were. And I think that understanding the medium, finding ways to tell stories, and packaging them well, so that you get the best out of Instagram, YouTube, or other video platforms. There's enormous amount of scope. Your problem will always be business model, etc. But as long as you have modest aims, let's face facts. None of us are, like, we've all read about people who are getting 1.5 crore salary, 80 lakh salary, 1 crore salary. We are never going to be those people. Nor should we. Because once you get that kind of a salary, it becomes very, very hard to not get seduced or not be forced to compromise. You get sucked into that system. I was talking to some friends who have left NDTV, and I was asking them, what about this person, what about that person, are they also going to jump ship? And they said, no, that person, he has financial commitments, he feels he can't leave right now, because this, and so this is what ties you down. So if you have somewhat modest expectations, and I think there's never been a better time for young journalists or freelance journalists to actually make their mark. And today, I would say some of the best reporting, like The Wire, we have a few full-time reporters, mainly in Delhi and Bombay, but we use freelancers very regularly from Andhra, Tamil Nadu, from Kashmir, J&K, Northeast, and a lot of other publications are using freelance. So there's a great scope for freelance journalists, freelance reporters, and I think that if you have video skills and you're able to tell video stories, the sky's the limit for what is possible. And so it's I think this is the optimistic side. That and whenever I meet, I spoke recently in Trivandrum to a group of journalism students, and I'm going to Loyola College tomorrow. And it's not at all my intention to discourage people from entering this profession. I think this is a great time to enter, actually, because never has the need for bold, courageous people been greater. And so if you enter this profession and you're keen to do something, even if you're frustrated at your current place of work, there's plenty that you can do. And so I'm not in the least pessimistic, and I frankly, whenever I go, people say it's only The Wire. Actually, it's not. Like, we get a great deal of strength from the fact that we are part of an ecosystem. We are part, for example, we and some other News Laundry, News Minute, etc. We created this forum called DigiPub Foundation. So we've created an industry association of digital-only platforms. Now we have nearly 100 members from around the country, including from Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Northeast, small publications. Because we feel that if we stick together as digital platforms, and some individual journalists also, who, Faye D'Souza, for example, Barkha Dutt, who are doing their own thing. And we're saying, look, you're also digital, you should also be part of this initiative. So that gives us a lot of strength. So I'm that way quite optimistic about what we can do, particularly given the fact that technology is cheap, is accessible, and gives us the ability to scale, to reach people that we've never had before. Like stories that we put out can reach millions of people today at the click of a button at no cost to us, the delivery part. Whereas in the old days, you have to print newspapers, magazines, or if you I was talking. You were telling me about Pudhe Talamuri. Like if you don't master the distribution side, then your channel is finished. So we don't have to in digital. You don't have to worry about that. But of course, government knows that for all of us, the conduit is social media. That's why they are desperate to throttle social media. And I'm a little bit worried about Elon Musk, I have to say. Because before Musk came, Twitter was sensible enough to file a case in Bangalore High Court, Karnataka High Court, challenging the government's right to demand that they remove links. Because they said, look, you are telling us to take down these tweets, and you're citing law and order and national security, but this is not justified. Very good stand that they took. But will Elon Musk pursue that? I don't think so. I hope he does. But the speed with which they took down these BBC documentary links is not a good sign. And if the government succeeds in throttling social media, that will be a very big challenge for us. Which is why we are already looking at, we are planning for looking at newsletters as a way of direct distribution. So instead of then relying on social media entirely, you try to connect your reader on a daily basis by sending her an email with all the important links. So that way it can't be blocked, even if Twitter or Facebook surrenders. We can always have that route. And even if tomorrow a website is blocked, if you are in direct touch with your readers through email, then it becomes much harder for government to shut you down. So for every route that, as I said, government tries to find new ways to throttle, but technology also gives us new ways to resist. And so for that reason, we should not be too pessimistic.
Hi sir, my name is James from Sabarita, senior Sabarita. You are told that except Tamil Nadu media people, media companies, North India's media companies are compromised. You told.
I didn't say except. I said I don't know about Tamil Nadu.
That's what I wanted to know about.
Yeah. I mean, my knowledge is very limited on this. I don't think it's healthy that you have political parties which control channels. That's always a recipe for disaster, in my view. And we see this in Tamil Nadu, in Punjab, in Odisha, in Bengal. Now Mamata wants to start her own channel. BJP indirectly controls many channels. And this is not a good thing.
Okay. You told that you don't know many things about Tamil Nadu. Okay. Actually, my question was on that issue only. Do you have any idea that Tamil Nadu media people should go in a particular way, and how they are going? And now, of course, we feel that Tamil Nadu journalists are going in a good way. And do we have any idea, or do you have any suggestion that giving to the Tamil Nadu journalists to go on this way, or to take this path, to come, or to take all the tools to come out?
So, I can only speak at a very general level, James. That, I think this gathering is a wonderful gathering because it's brought together people from all different channels. I wonder if at the level of management, this kind of solidarity is possible. Probably not. But it's important, again, I don't know of the extent to which individual journalists are harassed here. I hope it's not as common here as it is in UP, say, or in Jammu Kashmir or Maharashtra or anywhere else. But if and when journalists are targeted for doing their job, I would say even if they are with a different channel, even if that channel is aligned, so let's say it's a DMK government right now, and JITV reporters some attempt is made to prosecute them. I think it's important for the media community to take a stand on principle. Like, I became very unpopular with many friends 2 years ago when I criticized the manner in which cases were filed against Arnab Goswami. Now, I don't like Arnab Goswami, I don't like the work he does, and I've never hidden this fact. But for one program, which was an obnoxious program, I'm not sure if it was a crime, and I'm not comfortable with criminal cases being filed over programs. That's my fundamental point of view. But even if Congress in Chhattisgarh decides that they want to file a case against Arnab because he said something about Sonia Gandhi, when you have 6 cases filed in different courts for the identical issue, using identical language, it's very clear that this is harassment. There's no two ways about it. There's no debate here. The idea is to harass the fellow. And I don't think that's a good thing. Because this tactic, which was used against Arnab Goswami, and in a very foolish way, it took the Supreme Court hardly half an hour to say that this is rubbish. That how can one program lead to 6 identical cases? How can he be expected to run to Bikaner and Nagpur and Chhattisgarh and Punjab? So we are going to club all the cases together, and they gave Arnab Goswami relief. But by doing that, they showed a way for other parties to behave in a similar fashion. So look at the way that Mohammad Zubair was harassed. And BJP was cleverer than Congress. Instead of filing 10 cases for that same one tweet, that honeymoon hotel, Hanuman hotel, that tweet. Instead of filing 10 cases, they said, Acha, we'll file this case, then we'll open a money laundering case, and then we'll look at other complaints that people have filed in Barabanki and Lakhimpur and so on. And as he got bail in one case, the next case was opened. It's much more clever. And they succeeded in keeping Mohammad Zubair in prison for nearly 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I publicly, I think I criticized, I said, I had the decency to stand up for Arnab Goswami when he was unfairly targeted. People like him should defend Zubair. They don't. In fact, they are encouraging the attack on Zubair. Right? So I think this principle that you defend journalists when they are under attack, regardless of what their view or ideology is. And I think that's an important principle. I'm not sure that answers your question because, as I said, I don't know the too many specifics of the Tamil Nadu situation. But this Coimbatore case, for example, should have been taken up by all of media when this website was being targeted during COVID time. But sadly, the media doesn't do that. And at the Wire, for us, it's very, we are very, whenever we hear of cases of journalists being targeted, we do feel it's important to report it, to highlight it, so that the public is aware. And at the end of the day, it's the physical safety, it's your ability to do your job without being subjected to unfair and illegal pressure that matters the most. So I would say that is one important kind of aspect of journalistic solidarity that will help us all if we are large-hearted enough that even if there's a reporter we don't like and we don't like the story that person did, and maybe it's a wrong story, but if there is abuse of state power, then that abuse has to be condemned. We should always be against abuse of state power, and for a very self-serving reason, because that abuse will tomorrow happen against us.
Sir, what about there is a lot of incidents against the press since from independence, but we don't have a powerful organization of owners or editors. For example, this Information Act, the Editors Guild of India has filed its objections to it. Why we are not having an all India body? Because you are from Delhi and you know the Delhi circumstances and from all over India. The attack against the press is not reciprocated in all India level. For example, Carpet, who's been arrested in UAE, he harms there. Even he cannot execute his bail. The magistrate went on leave. He was attending some functions or others. See, this attack, see, you said the cases against, about 260 cases filed against us in beef eating Mami case through Tamil Nadu against Nakiri. See, this is not reciprocated well in an all India level basis. Why there is no all India level based reciprocation when the journalists were attacked or anything done by the central government? If it, I feel it is not there. That is the only vacuum where the central government can operate and penalize, like Chhattisgarh government did against Arnab Goswami, as you say. See, why there is no body? Why there is no teeth for press information bureau? Why it is not done?
So that's a good question. You have media bodies. The owners have what is it called? The Indian Newspaper Society, INS. Broadcasters are divided. So there used to be one body, the News Broadcasters Association, Standards Authority, or News Broadcasters Association. Then they had a fallout. Some people, they didn't like they had a kind of self-regulating mechanism, which was critical of something that Republic TV had done. So Republic TV exited. And so now you have different television bodies. And I think that the worst thing that we saw was when these IT rules were formulated. The fact is that it affects everybody. Because everybody has a website. So timesofindia.com will suffer as much under the IT rules as the Wire will, or as republictv.com will. But what these proprietors did, so-called legacy media, they went to meet Anurag Thakur and said that, sir, you leave us out of this, because we already come under Press Council of India or the Broadcasting Authority of India, etc., etc. So don't cover us in this. And luckily, government didn't agree to that. But it was a very foolish stand. Instead of fighting the IT rules unitedly, they thought that they could somehow escape. And now with the latest, this PIB business, fact check, this is something which will affect everybody. So I was pleasantly surprised when Times of India invited the Wire's editor, Seema Chishti, to write an op-ed, to write an editorial page article on this PIB fact-checking rule. I thought that was a new turn for Times of India to not only want to raise its voice against this, but also to invite us to write in that newspaper. But it's very unfortunately, the problem today is that some media organizations are fully aligned with the government. So they actually fully support all these moves, and they know, and perhaps Anurag Thakur would have told them also privately, that you don't worry about this. This is not, on paper it is for everybody, but it won't be used against you. It's like they have this rule for FDI in digital. Now, until 3 years ago, there was no restriction on getting foreign investment in a digital platform. So if you wanted to start a website in Tamil Nadu, you could get a foreign investor. And it was under the automatic approval route. So no permission was required. Whereas for newspapers, only 24% FDI is allowed, and for television, I think 70% or 75%. So government said that we are going to put a cap. We are going to introduce FDI for digital also, which is bad enough. But then they said this will be approval on case-by-case basis. Which means that if some pro-government website, like this Op India, if they want to get FDI, I'm pretty sure their file will be cleared very fast. But if somebody else wants to get, that approval will never come. It's like these judges. Judges that the government wants, within 2 days of the collegium recommending their names, they are sworn in as judges. And judges that the government doesn't want, their file is never clear. So I think that the government is making very skillful use of the division within the media. And it's very unfortunate, because this weakens everybody actually. And but I don't see any easy answer other than at least those bodies which are determined to take a stand, that they continue to fight. And so far, I mean, like Digipub is there. We have raised our voice on this IT rules very clearly. And whenever we come across examples of violation of press freedom, Digipub issue statements. Editors Guild is very bold. A new thing, which is a new development, which is very positive, is that the press clubs have got activated again. I don't know about in Chennai, but the Delhi Press Club, the Press Club of India has become very active. And Bombay Press Club, MPC, Mumbai Press Club, very active. So I think that finding ways to activate the press clubs, because these, journalistic bodies, sadly the journalist unions are quite weak across the country. But if we could find some way to activate those, there's always much greater strength in speaking collectively. It's much harder for the government to ignore. And I think that's what we have to somehow strive for. And I think that this kind of an association is a very positive. I mean, the fact that this meeting was hardly called with 1 or 2 days notice, and the fact that so many of you have come to take part in this discussion, shows that there is a lot of, eagerness to work together. And that's a very good thing.
Malvayan activist. You said that you are facing cases in Wire. And you also said you have a organization of digital media platforms. Do you fight the cases unitedly, or you face the cases? If you have a case against Wire, you fight it, and if you have a case against all, you fight it.
So the cases are all filed individually, right? So there's little scope. Like, we cannot intervene in a case against Scroll, say, right? And similarly, a case against us, we have to fight it out, right? But what Digipub does, and this is something that we are working on now, is to create a mechanism whereby publications that cannot afford legal help or need legal advice, we put together a panel of lawyers across the country.
They work pro bono?
Yeah, the idea is that they would work pro bono or just for the filing fees, whatever the basic fees are. And there are lots of lawyers who have come forward to say that we are willing to help. And similarly, the Press Club of India has put together a panel of 10 or 12 lawyers who have said that we are willing to fight media cases pro bono. So this is a very positive thing. And Digipub has, this is an issue very close to our heart. And particularly a lot of the individual or freelance members, they are the most vulnerable. Like some guy who has a YouTube channel and is working by himself or herself. Tomorrow, if a case gets filed, it becomes very difficult for them to resist. And the very sad thing is when people decide not to fight. Like, I'll give you an example. I was contacted by a young filmmaker. I won't give his name here, but he had made he's from South India, and he had made a short film on Jammu Kashmir about disappearances. And he wanted our help to publicize it. And I said, look, it's a great, he was putting it up on his YouTube channel. I said that we will give a link to it, and we did an article, we reviewed it. And 3 weeks later, YouTube took it down. And I said, what happened? The link is not working. And he said, yeah, they took it down because Government of India filed a complaint. So I said, well, I'll connect you to these 2 lawyers, and they will take it up for you. And but then the person, he said, no, I'm afraid that I'm working on another project now. I'm afraid that this will get compromised then. So let this be. So I said, if you let it be, it just becomes worse for you and for everybody else. Unless you fight these and challenge these, the government's appetite is only whetted. but somehow he didn't want to do it. So you can't, we are very keen that for all freedom of speech and freedom of press issues, there has to be a legal fight. You can't allow this stuff to go unchallenged. That's why we took the lead in challenging the IT rules. And after that, I was very happy to see there's more than 15 or 20 cases that different media organizations have filed against the IT rules. And they've got stays, the good judgment of Kerala High Court, Bombay High Court, and so on. So I think there is some appetite. And the fact is that we need to coordinate legal strategy.
We see that Rana Ayub is now sued for something, for contributions she got
Yeah.
for COVID.
Yeah.
Why are maybe getting contributions or donations from several countries? Do you fear that FMLA cases can be?
You see, the thing is that
It's very different cases. Rana Ayub was collecting money as an individual for this kind of COVID relief. And I think the main charge against her is not under that this is foreign money, but that maybe she didn't.
That is the enforcement directive.
Yeah. So ED is more concerned how this money has been used, etc. And they have made some charges which she has replied to, but they're still harassing her. Right. In the case of Mohammed Zubair, they tried to insinuate that Alt News was getting money from abroad, which it wasn't, because Alt News gets no money from abroad. In our case, we get money, see, as a non-profit, we are bound by the FCRA, Foreign Contributions Regulations Act. We cannot receive donation from any foreign entity.
For an individual?
No, any foreign individual or entity. So if, in other words, a non-Indian national or a non-Indian company or entity cannot donate to the wire. NRIs, Indians who are living in Gulf, for example, they can donate, and they do donate. And we basically verify that they have an Indian passport as a kind of precautionary measure. So we do the due diligence, and we are confident that, of course, to harass anybody, the government can do anything, but they will not be able to fault us on this for sure.
Can you have English subtitles for Arfa?
Yeah, so that is next. That is part of our future plan, definitely. It's a little bit expensive, but the idea is to do that actually, because we do a lot of Hindi videos, and they're very popular, but they're not understood outside of the Hindi region. So this is definitely part of the plan. So in the next 1 year, I'm quite confident that we will have implemented that.
Hi sir, my name is Deva. I'm working in RNSI. I'm asking a question about journalism, sir. What is the extent of journalists in bringing out a story? Does it stop in publishing the issue, exposing it to the public and bringing out to the public discourse? Does it stop that, or journalists should follow it up and take it to the logical conclusion? Does it stop in bringing out a public discourse, creating awareness among the people, or the journalist should follow the issue and take it to the logical?
Yeah, no, great question. I think that journalism is all about follow-up. You can't do a story and leave it at that. And often the follow-up is even more dramatic and tells you a lot more than the original story. So, of course, you say take it to the logical conclusion. Sadly, that's not in our hands. I'll give you an example from my own career. When I was at Times of India, we had covered this fake encounter in Jammu Kashmir, which took place in a village called Pathribal in 2000, March 2000, where the army and the police killed 5 people and said that there were 5 civilians, and they issued a press release saying that these guys are terrorists. And the villagers began to protest and say, no, these are our relatives. The bodies were exhumed and they were sent for DNA testing. So we covered the story until then. About 6 months later, I told my colleagues, look, we have to follow the story. What happened to the DNA testing? So we found a source in CFSL Hyderabad, and we made an astonishing discovery that the CFSL said that the DNA samples of the victims and the relatives did not match. Now, we were disheartened because that suggested that the government's original claim was correct. But then when we looked at the report more closely, they pointed out that there was a major discrepancy in the DNA samples. That a relative, the mother of the victim who had given her blood, seems to have been switched for somebody else's blood. Because these fools in the police, they didn't realize that when you do DNA of male and female, you can tell them apart. So these guys threw away the samples of all the mothers and gave their own blood to fool the system. But they should have got a police woman to give blood, not their own blood. So we did a story in Times of India about how these DNA samples have been switched. And then it became a huge scandal in J&K. The CBI was called in. The CBI did a full investigation. CBI filed murder charges against the police and army officers who were involved. But sadly, and this is where I come to the thing that the final settlement is not in our hands, the government refused to prosecute. And after 10 years, the Supreme Court also said fine. So what do you do? So you can imagine the frustration of not just the reporters, but the families. That here is a case where the CBI is saying that there's a murder of innocent people. But the Ministry of Defense refused to give permission to prosecute the soldiers. And when the court gave them an ultimatum that either you give permission or you hold a court-martial. The army said, okay, we'll do a court-martial. They did a secret court-martial and acquitted everybody. And that's it. So when you do follow-ups, you should be prepared for disappointment. Because not every story will have a happy ending. There are many stories which have a happy ending. Like Machil fake encounter, finally, those soldiers were convicted. Sterlite seems to be going in the right direction. And a few other cases there are. But I think it is essential. The worst a journalist can do is to do a story up to a point and then drop it. You have to keep following. And I think the reason the Gujarat riots is still with us today is because journalists, activists, the families, everybody persisted. They didn't drop it. And, and the story is still not over, by the way. And one of the most foolish things that this government could have done, because once the Supreme Court said, no, the case is dismissed, and there's no evidence against Modi, that may have been the legal end of the matter. But they then went and filed cases against Teesta, and R.V. Srikumar and Sanjeev Bhatt. So the government itself is keeping it alive. So I'm saying, so journalists have to keep following it. No matter how much.
How will we get kicked out of the heavy competition here, sir? Issues keep rising up daily.
Yeah. I mean,
We keep following on certain issues and coping up with the.
Yeah, but there has to be multitasking. No? In the sense that I mean, every journalist I know has 6 or 7 stories cooking. Some are on the front burner, some are back burner, some are in the oven, some are put in the fridge, right? So you have to be an expert at managing that. And it's a very good discipline to have a file of your stories, and every now and then you open that file and say, hey, what's happening with this? And you will make discoveries. You will find that these stories all have a life of their own. So it's a very good journalistic discipline to follow. And also to, by the way, one very bad thing in Indian journalism is if somebody else has done a story, then we don't want to follow it. Like when I was Deputy Chief of Bureau in Times of India and then Chief of Bureau in Hindu, every morning we would have a bureau meeting and we'll say, look, Statesman has done the story, Express has done that story. And the first response of the reporter is that this is a non-story. And then they say, nahi, ye to kuch nahi hai, you know. Or they say this guy is a racketeer or this, fake story. But it could be a very good story. And if we give up our reticence to follow up other stories, and for us at The Wire, this is because we have a very small team of reporters. Some of our best and most popular pieces have been when we pick up something that is on page 6 of Hindustan Times in a single column. And we say, let us do this thoroughly, you know. And you find it's a much bigger story. So I think you should always be on the lookout for what the papers are published, because not every news editor has the same sense. And sometimes newspapers or TV channels deliberately underplay stories. They don't want to cover it. But they can't suppress fully either, right? So they'll give 2 paragraphs. So you take that 2 paragraph and you make a big story. So I think following your own stories, following other people's stories, it's a very, very good discipline.
Last question, sir. Heard your phone was Pegasus spyware was installed in your phone.
Yeah.
What is the status of it, sir? Thank you.
So the status of that is, there was a Supreme Court committee which submitted its report. Report is secret. Ramana, who was Chief Justice, he said that they found malware in at least 2 phones, but they could not say if it is Pegasus or not. Obviously, they can't say because, like a good Sarkari committee, they will certify it as Pegasus only if the Pegasus company says, yes, this is ours. And they will never do that. But the fact is that the court has recorded that at least 2 phones had malware. And I'm very confident that of the 7 or 8 phones that were given, one was mine, one was Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. And we had confirmed proof through amnesty of Pegasus on both of our phones. So one day that report will come out. And of course, it's going to be very, very damaging and explosive. I wish Prashant Kishore had given his phone to that committee. Because it's one thing to target or harass a journalist. Believe me, when you target an opposition leader, and Prashant Kishore was targeted with Pegasus during the West Bengal election. That is an electoral malpractice. Because you use public funds to spy on a rival party. And President Nixon had to resign for a crime of that kind in 1970s. And what Modi has done is 100 times worse than Watergate. Because nobody accused Nixon of using public money. There was no accusation that US taxpayer money was used to finance the break-in at the Watergate Hotel. And whereas here, public money was used to buy Pegasus. Government officials were used to deploy it. They're the ones, the people monitoring the Pegasus are probably IB and RAW. So you have government servants doing a political party's dirty work in an election. And this is a convictable offense. Indira Gandhi was disqualified for something much less damaging. Which is why Modi and all will never allow that file to progress. So as of now, I'm not very optimistic. But the current Chief Justice seems to be reopening many of we hear that the electoral bonds case is going to be heard and so on. So maybe this file will also see the light of day.
I have a question. My name is Mahil. We are running an independent media. सवाल ये है कि जो आप लोग जो चला रहे हो independent.
Hindi எல்லாரும் புரியுமா?
தமிழ்ல கேளு.
Actually, இங்க நாங்க independent media run பண்றோம். அதுல இருக்கிற பெரிய சவால் என்னன்னா லாங்குவேஜ் பேரியர். தமிழ்னு சொன்னா எங்களுடைய பார்டர் வந்து தமிழ்நாடு, கொஞ்சம் தமிழ் லாங்குவேஜ் தெரிஞ்ச பசங்க மக்கள் அவங்களோட இருந்தோம். இங்கிலீஷ்க்கு உங்களோட எல்லைகள் பெருசு. ஹிந்திக்கும் அதே மாதிரி ஒரு பெரிய பார்டர் இருக்குது. இப்போ அங்கே நடக்கிற நியூஸ் இங்கே வரணும் அப்படின்னா பெரிய கம்யூனிகேஷன் கேப் இருக்குது, பெரிய கம்யூனிகேஷன். அப்போ இங்கே இருக்கிற மீடியாஸ்க்கு விசிபிலிட்டிஸ் கம்மி. அங்கே இருக்கிற நியூஸை நாங்கள் எடுத்துக்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொன்னாலும் இங்கே இருக்கிற ஒரு பொலிட்டிக்கல் என்விரான்மெண்ட் வந்து அதை தடுக்கும் பெரும்பாலும். அப்போ ஒரு கொலாபரேஷன் இங்கே இருக்கிற இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் மீடியாஸோட ஒரு நியூஸ் இங்கே ட்ரான்ஸ்ஃபர் பண்ணுறதோ அல்லது ஒரு கொலாபரேஷன் அப்படி ஏதாவது ஐடியா இருக்கிறது?
கொலாபரேஷன் பண்ணலாம். We do in fact, I'll answer in English only, but we have ongoing, like initially we thought that we can make some money by syndication, but then we said that it's better to just give. So in Karnataka, there are a couple of websites that regularly use our stuff. In Andhra Pradesh,
We have been doing.
so in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Odisha, everywhere actually. We publish the Wire Urdu as a website, and we find that virtually all the Urdu newspapers in the country regularly are using the stuff. Very often they don't even give credit, which is fine. I mean, it's not fine, but what do you do? You know. So we are open to collaboration. So similarly, we use quite a bit of, like occasionally when there's a story, I'm trying to think of the name of the website in Karnataka, Pratidvani. So sometimes we've asked them to give us a story. There is a website in Gujarat called Vibes of India, run by Deepal Trivedi, and we regularly use their stuff. They take our stuff, and we collaborate with Dawn in Pakistan. We collaborate with the newspaper in Nepal, with Irrawaddy and Mizima, who are Burmese media. So we are very open to that kind of collaboration, and I think most, like I know Scroll would also be quite happy with that. So in the Explore Panla, like so you yeah, absolutely. So you can write to us, and we can even sign an agreement, where we are able to allow, legally allow you to use that stuff. I mean, the only hesitation may be simply that there's a certain amount of legal exposure, in the sense that like a lot of stories have to be worded very carefully. Like in English, you have to say alleged corruption of Adani, right? So if in the Telugu translation, that fellow drops the word allegedly, and then Adani cites that Telugu story to sue me, then that is the problem, right? So there has to be some trust and confidence in publication, but I think that this idea of collaboration is very important. Particularly, I would say, since this is a TV group, it would be excellent because we are constrained right now. We can't afford PTI and all this ANI stuff. So if you are able to access footage, then we can put together stories, from across the country. And so there's a lot of scope for this, which I think it would be good. We can have this discussion actually later, and through email we can develop something of this. It's a very good idea.
Siddharth, I have a question. I'm MC Rajan. Given the current situation and the majoritarian narrative, is gender diversity in newsroom and caste diversity is helpful? And in the emerging digital media, how far this will be?
No, I would say gender diversity is already a reality in many places. I can't speak about the Tamil language newsrooms, but in many of the English publications, or even in a place like Kerala, where there's a lot of sexism, very patriarchal society. But I was amazed at this event I went to in Trivandrum the other day. There were maybe 50 journalism students, of whom 40 were women. So I think women are coming forward. The only problem is that women in leadership roles is still very few and far between. I think in the lifetime of Indian newspapers, Hindu, I think Deccan Chronicle, and Hindi Hindustan. I think 3 papers have had women editors, which is pathetic, if you think about it. So I think that media organizations have to solve this problem proactively of not just gender imbalance, but not just at the horizontal level, but also in the hierarchy, to make sure that it's not a male-centric leadership. The caste diversity is even more important, I would say, because today the situation is that you do not have caste diversity. Again, I can't speak for Tamil Nadu, but in English and in Hindi, there's a very high domination of upper caste Hindus, and and the problem is also compounded by the fact that there's a lot of casteism. It's not a passive, not just the presence of Savarna, but a lot of them, like we've heard many stories, and this has also been documented. A lot of casteism in the newsroom, the kind of comments that are made, and the way in which that affects the choice of stories. This is a serious problem. A few years ago, we had a meeting at ACJ, and we even issued a document called Taramani Declaration, where there were, I think, 3 or 4 editors and a few reporters, and the idea was to build a situation where we would have a conversation with all the big publications that they need to be proactive about caste diversity in the newsroom. But sadly, that initiative didn't go very far, and there's a reluctance. The big papers are not interested in, like they cling to the idea that everything is done on the basis of merit. But the fact is that most hiring happens based on who you know. It's very rare at senior levels. When is the last time that you saw an ad that newspaper is looking for an editor, or newspaper is looking for senior? Like you have recruitment at the entry level, but at the mid level or higher level, mostly it's through word of mouth, who you know, and that is of course a recipe for the replication of caste hierarchies. So Brahmins will get Brahmins, Punjabi will get Punjabis. This is the reality, and of course SC/ST are the biggest sufferers and losers in this. I think it's also important to create greater, to give a push in journalism institutes. Like I know that a group of people have been working with ACJ to make sure that every year for the SC/ST students who get in, that they have full financial support. And if they need a computer, then they get the computer, etc., etc. And money has been raised for that by some well-meaning journalists. But this is not institutionalized. And I think it's important that a large enough cadre of SC/ST journalists come out from the journalism institutes and then find a nurturing, welcoming environment in media organizations, which today does not exist. I mean, I would say it's not necessarily the case that there is conscious caste discrimination, but it's just the informal, the chalta hai, that they don't want to put ads, they don't want to go out of their way. So you then, if you're looking to make a recruitment, you just see, okay, who's available, and because you operate in your own bubble, your own circle, then you hire somebody who's from exactly your own background. And that's a big problem. So I would say that regardless of communalism, you said in the context of, this is a general problem. I would say regardless of the communal atmosphere or not, the fact, and in the US, there is a conscious, beginning from the 70s, the American Society of Newspaper Editors took a decision that there needs to be workplace diversity. There have to be more women, more African Americans, more Latinas, Latinos, so that the newsroom gets a greater diversity of life experience, and that helps journalism. And I think another problem is that there should not be a kind of ghettoization of beats. So it should not be that when you have a woman, a reporter, like very few women reporters have been, I'm talking about the national press, covering home ministry and defense ministry. You see very few women in those beats. I think Vijeta Singh, who does home ministry for Hindu, may be the only senior woman in a big publication. Or maybe there are a few others. Meetu Jain used to do it earlier for TV18. But generally there would be this idea that, just like in government, Sushma Swaraj was a rare woman who became external affairs minister. Otherwise, in all these parties traditionally, the senior woman politician would become minister for women and child. And that's it. And even somebody like Salman Khurshid, in the first Manmohan Singh administration, was Minister of Minority Affairs. Only later they said, okay, bring him to external affairs. Whereas his natural ability was with external affairs. But because he was Muslim, they said, you go to minority affairs. So this mindset also is very wrong.
We have independent journalists and also mainstream journalists here. There is a opinion that independent journalists are not at all organized. They are not coming under any law, and they are doing whatever coming up in their mind. And some politicians are using that to create a tussle between these two groups, between the independent journalists and the mainstream journalists. Some politicians used to create some morons between these two groups and make them fight. I think we should have a union, because recently a politician from BJP in Tamil Nadu, when we were questioning him in the press meet, he addressed that you don't even have a union. Who are you to question me? He asked to us. And I think the man who got abused on that press meet by that politician is here. So we are continuously being abused. But we believe a union between us, the union of independent journalists, or a collection of independent journalists should be there to address our common issues. And we as independent journalists in Tamil Nadu, with our contacts, we are trying to build something. But we cannot go further. It is stopping at some point. We believe you as a senior independent journalist in this field should initiate some progress for that, and should bring some other independent journalists to this forum, and we should make a common forum to address our issues, to address when an independent journalist for example, if Zubair is being abused by this government, the independent journalists are the only community which voiced out for him. When any particular thing is happening against journalism, the independent journalists are the one who is voicing out for that. I believe we should form a common forum for that, to discuss our issues and to discuss our future and to move forward.
So I think we need to be clear about terminology first. By independent journalist, do you mean freelance journalist, or do you mean a journalist working for an independent news platform? Okay, so because there's a difference, in my view, Zubair is not an independent journalist. Zubair works for an independent news platform. Same with The Wire, right? But there are lots of freelance journalists. So maybe we need to have a clear terminology. But I would say that in an ideal world, journalist unions should be open to everybody. Like in Delhi, we have Delhi Union of Journalists. You do not have to be an employee of Times of India or ZTV or whatever to be a member of DUJ. You pay your dues and you become a union member. So I would say that creating a union of journalists, I'm sure Tamil Nadu already has one probably, or several, but there should be a union of journalists. Think about whether you want to restrict it to so-called independent journalists or freelance journalists or whatever. Because at the end of the day, the problem, it is not this politician is wrong or this person is wrong who says that the laws are different. They are not different. In fact, these IT rules was created by the government on the fiction that we want to create a level playing field. That newspapers have the Press PRB Act, Press and Regulation of Books Act, and television channels have the Broadcasting Act, whereas digital platforms have nothing. This was the fiction. Because the fact is that every media organization has freedom of press under Article 19 and is subject to the same restrictions as anybody else. So, the reasonable restriction on Times of India that there should not be defamation, there should not be all the, causing enmity between people or whatever it is, applies as much to TOI or Hindu or NDTV as it does to The Wire, as it does to you as an individual. And the fact that many of us have cases against us is proof of the fact that the law is the same. So we need to refute this idea that different journalists face different laws. Law is one. So if law is one, then maybe the union should also be one. And honestly, I don't know the situation with the press corps in Tamil Nadu, but it is essential that there should be a union of journalists, working journalists. Whether you are working as a freelancer, whether you are with a small publication. I was told that one of the reasons this association exists is because the newspaper journalists are not very friendly towards the television people. See, this is all self-defeating, because you can only resist attacks on journalism coming through the misuse of those same laws if you do it unitedly. So that would be my advice, that there should be some serious effort. This is beyond what the wire can manage, frankly. But I can certainly, I will try to read up a little and understand what is the situation vis-a-vis journalist unions in Tamil Nadu, and then maybe see if I can make some constructive suggestions.